Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the In-Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I'm going to do a review and comparison video of Green Day's 1994 album, Dookie. I'm going to go over the best sounding pressings of this in my collection and kind of tell you my thoughts. I've got a pretty wide-ranging selection. This is an album that's not that old, but has actually been done quite a few times and been done by different people quite a few times. Now, I will start off by saying that this is not a particularly good sounding record, and this was actually a relatively difficult review and comparison because there's not really much to work with. It's a punk album, and although it's like a popular punk album, pop punk, it's still a punk album, and it's not a record that was really recorded particularly well. And that's not something I really ever noticed until recently, until I was sitting down and being analytical and critical of the album. I never really noticed it anymore. It's a record that I grew up with. It was part of my childhood. It's a very just important record for the 90s, but not something that I really paid much attention to sonically. It just never came up. But with the release of the new One Step from Because Sound Matters. This is a new series they're doing. This is so far the first one that they did that's actually all analog. They did American Idiot, but that was from a digital source. And they did 3 Linkin Park titles, all also from digital sources. So we've had the Linkin Park and the American Idiot, but this is the first one that was being released that was done from the original master tape, done by Chris Bellman. And because of its price, it's $125 retail. Of course, the question came, Mike, how does this sound compare to everything else? So I set out to answer that question. The thing is, when I first got this, I wanted to listen to it, so I immediately opened it and put it on the turntable in the store. And that's not a system that I really use to be hypercritical of because it's not optimally set up. You've got 2 speakers or 50 foot apart. But I got to say, when something sounds really great, you kind of know it right off the bat. And this One Step did not sound like, wow, well, this is amazing. I've never heard this before. It didn't have that. So people ask me like, well, how does it sound? And it's like, well, I can't really compare it yet because I haven't compared it to anything else. So my initial thought was, it doesn't sound that good off the bat. But then in all fairness, it's like, okay, but how does it sound compared to everything else? And I said, I'm going to need a little bit of time to go over it. And that's kind of what I'm going to do now. And it's actually something that I've been working on for a couple of days. I'll show you kind of the versions of this record that I have. And a lot of these versions can represent other other albums because the stampers were used for various pressings. Like this is a first US pressing, pressed at SRC. Now this particular pressing also, mastering wise, you can get on the US pink vinyl version. But the US version is the true first pressing. It has the non-airbrushed out Ernie. Unfortunately, I think they were worried about the team of, I don't know, who owns this? Disney? The Disney lawyers coming to get them. So, unfortunately, Ernie has been airbrushed out for all eternity. But, yeah, so this particular pressing, you could have the pink US pressing, or you can have this, and it's the same record. This is actually a splattered wax pressing with a different mastering. You can also have the green vinyl version that has the same mastering of this. This is the Kevin Gray cut that came out almost 15 years ago maybe, and has been done numerous times, reissued, using the same metalwork. This is Kevin Gray cut at Acoustic. Then you have the 30th anniversary, which is using a newer Chris Bellman cut. Okay. So how did these all sound when I compared them to one another, which is really the purpose of this video, because anybody can say that this record sounds great. And then you got to say, well, okay, compared to what? And that's the thing that people just, when it comes to shooting out records and listening to different versions, they don't really elaborate on. Yes, it could sound great, but compared to what? So compared to what? I will start off with this particular pressing. Now, this is extremely rare and very valuable. I think 100 copies of this splatter wax are known to exist. The green vinyl is a little bit more common, but still very expensive. This is horrible sounding. Although this is the most valuable record of the bunch, and even the green vinyl would be quite valuable, The mastering on this is absolutely atrocious. And that's saying something because this record, like I said, is not very well recorded to begin with. So you take a not well recorded record and then you master it in a fashion that, I don't know what the source was for this. It might have been an 8-track recording off of the radio back in the day. It's just really not that good. It's pretty terrible. I have a lot of not so good, pretty terrible records in my collection that are rare. But it's for videos like this to where I can say, this isn't very good. If you're wanting this record to listen to, this marble version, which you're probably never going to find, or the green vinyl version are pretty terrible. Okay, there you go. Up next, let's talk about I'll kind of lump these together because they're both done by two extremely well-respected audiophile mastering engineers. The Kevin Gray cut and the Chris Bellman cut. Okay, so the Kevin Gray, let's start with the Chris Bellman cut. The Chris Bellman cut is quite good for a mid-90s punk record. It is quite good. Compared to the Kevin Gray cut, and I'll tell you, I prefer the Kevin Gray cut, but they're super close. Now, if I had just the Bellman, would I run out and buy the Kevin Gray? No, it's not that much better. The Kevin Gray cut has a little bit of edge when it comes to some sibilance issues that this record has kind of always had. And the Kevin Gray cut kind of on my system, to my ears, kind of tames some of that sibilance. But for the most part, they're both done in a very similar approach as far as you don't really get a lot of compression. They're done. It's good. It's a good sounding record. It's $25. And they're quite good. They're both cut fairly low in the sense that you got to turn the volume up. So if you're going to properly shoot this record out, you really got to make sure you volume match this, because the 4 records that I have left, the One Step, the original first pressing, and these Kevin Gray, Chris Bellman cuts are wildly different in volume. And when you turn a punk record up loud, it sounds better. You know, when you turn Longview up really nice and loud and you get that nice bass intro with those rolling drums, it just sounds better at louder volumes. So you really got to make a good effort to really try to volume match this. Otherwise, it's going to really throw you off pretty significantly. I don't think there's too much of a difference between these two to where I would rush out and get one over the other. Like I said, though, they're both in print. My preference, just because of the sibilance, would be the Kevin Gray cut. But they're just, again, we're talking about a punk record. It's just okay sounding. What I do prefer is actually the US first pressing. But do I prefer it in a way that would lead me to go out and spend the money that this thing costs? No, I wouldn't. But what's nice about this, and from what I read, it's quite possible that this is all analog, but there's more compression on it. And there's bits of it that I like better, but there's bits of it that I prefer the more audiophile presentation. When you get into certain tracks, the use of compression has a more like authentic punk vibe. Like the drums on Longview, that bass and drum roll in on the original, I think is the best sounding. It kind of has the deeper bass. It kind of has a really more gritty punk sound. And I kind of prefer it overall compared to what we've done so far. But the amount of money this costs compared to one of these $25 imprints is so crazy. You'd be hard pressed to really notice the difference. I mean, it took a lot of effort on a really high-end, really revealing system to go back and forth once you volume match these and kind of discern the difference. Like I said, there are parts of this that I like better, but there is a little bit more sibilance on this versus the Kevin Gray cut. And there's parts of it that are less revealing and blur together. The upper end, the cymbals on the drums are just a little bit more, they're a little less metallic sounding. But the overall power chord, middle range, you know, the mid area of the album, which is, again, it's a punk record, so that's most of the record. I prefer the kind of sound on this original pressing, but it's just ever so slightly. This is a record by degrees, except for that first pressing. That's horrible. Don't buy that. It's a lot of money, too. That's horrible. But everything else is by degrees. So let's get to the one step. Now, the one step, $125, and it's pressed on VR900, which is super vinyl, SRX vinyl. You know, it's the pinnacle vinyl formulation that's out there. It's only being really manufactured, I think, in 2 places at this point. That is RTI and Mobile Fidelity's Fidelity Pressing Plant. This is done at RTI, but super quiet vinyl, right? Let's bust this out. I'll kind of show it to you. Really thick deluxe gatefold jacket. Beautiful records. $125. Is it better than everything else I've listened to? You know, slightly. It is. And I've read online and some people talk about how it's this magical epiphany. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's that. I think the thing that's going to throw a lot of people off on this particular record is it's cut really hot, which is what a 45 RPM record should be cut. The benefit of the 45 RPM is you can cut it really loud, really hot. You can get past all the surface noise of the record by doing that. And it really works well for this type of music, right? A little bit more detailed. The bass is just a little bit more ever-present. But the thing that this record has going for it is it's cut at 45 RPM. And the 45 RPM allows you to not have to groove cram the record. And you've got a lot less intergroove distortion on this record. By a lot less, I mean you really don't have any compared to the original, because the sound doesn't break down because you have to go so deep into, you know, the tail end of the record. That's the inherent benefit of a 45 RPM. It's better, but it's by degrees, very slightly better. I wonder if I was to listen to this on a more modest system, volume matching this, how much better it would actually sound. I'm not 100% sure. I guess I could theoretically go back to the store, put a little bit more modest system together, and do that. But I guess that's never been the purpose of these videos. I kind of want to be able to pick it apart. It is slightly better. I will say I don't know if it's worth $125, because the Kevin Gray or the Chris Bellman cut are quite good. This video, I don't know if it's been that helpful. It is slightly better. And if you don't really care about the money and you really just want the best of the best, I guess you could say that this one step is that. But it's so damn close, I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head around the 5 times price. Now, it's not advantageous for me to tell you that, because I have these available on the website, and they're not going to be available long because they only made 3,000 of them for $125 versus the record I make 5 times less money on, the $24.99 one. But it is a really small improvement, but it is an improvement nonetheless. But I think a lot of that just comes down to the fact that it's on 45 RPM. I think it's quite possible that Kevin could have got that out. And from what I hear, the Kevin Gray cut's actually digital. It's quite possible he could have got that out of a 45 as well. Who knows? It could have been better. And of course, the Chris Bellman cut, he did both of these records. And it is only slightly better at the 45 RPM, which I will say, when it came to records like American Idiot, I thought were like light years better than what had come previously. Like, that was a huge improvement. I'm not a Linkin Park fan, so I can't really comment on that. But American Idiot was a really substantial. That was like, wow, this is awesome. But it was a better recording. So, yeah, I gotta say, lo-fi punk records, and this is not quite, categorized as lo-fi, but compared to the stuff that I'm normally reviewing, one of the last records I did, Steely Dan's Asia, that's like a, although I prefer this album. I know that might be sacrilege, but musically, I actually prefer this. This is more my jam. I've never been a huge Steely Dan fan, but that record is at the pinnacle of recorded music, and this is not so much. So this was a hard review to do, going back and forth. I would say, unless you're just fanatically a fan of this record, or you want it to be the absolute best, and by a couple of degrees, the other two are the way to go, and I'd probably just do the Kevin Gray. But if you're looking for that last like 1 or 2%, that slightly better record, then the money's not a problem. Get the One Step. But if you're going to do this comparison on your own, please, oh please, if you're not value matching the record, wildly deceiving. Wildly deceiving. I've got number 60 here, actually. I just noticed that. Number 60 of 3,000. But yeah, that's kind of how I would say that these lay out. And by a couple of percentages up top. I would go with the One Step first, and then I would actually say the original pressing, very slightly under that. And then very slightly under that, I would say the Kevin Gray. And very slightly under that, I would say the Chris Bellman. And then way below that, I would say that green vinyl / splattered vinyl anomalous cut that came out as a promo item back in the mid-90s. That's awful. But having so many records kind of smooshed together as far as being very close, you guys have to make the decision. All right, guys, check us out online at theingroove.com. Until next time.